It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning at Sterling and Company. The kind of morning where I blended into the background, invisible, unnoticed, and unimportant. But then one simple gesture, one word in sign language changed everything. And I had no idea the CEO was watching from above. Backhand index pointing right before we dive in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments. Have you ever learned a special skill to help someone you love? I'd love to hear your stories. My name is Hannah. I'm 23 years old and 6 months ago, I was the most invisible person at Sterling and Company, one of the largest and most prestigious firms in the city. I was just the intern. The girl who made photocopies, fetched coffee, and updated spreadsheets. I was the one who sat quietly at her desk, praying no one would notice her, and sneaked out for lunch so I didn't have to make small talk in the crowded cafeteria. I hadn't always been like this. In high school I was more confident, even outgoing. But somewhere between failed interviews, rejections, and a string of small disappointments in college I shrank. By the time I landed this internship I was a shell of myself. Trying not to be a burden, trying not to take up space. That morning the office was buzzing with chaos. We had a major client presentation and everyone was rushing around, focused on their own urgent tasks. I was near the lobby stacking folders when I saw him. He was an older man, maybe in his 70s, dressed in a tailored suit that looked expensive and dignified. His silver hair was neatly combed back and he carried himself with quiet grace. But his face told another story. Frustration. Sadness. A kind of invisible wall between him and the bustling world around him. He stood at the reception desk trying desperately to explain something. But no words came out. His lips moved, his hands gestured, but his voice was broken, fragile. He was speech impaired. The receptionist, overwhelmed and pressed for time, sighed in frustration. "Sir, I don't understand. Maybe you can write it down," she said, already turning to help someone else. People walked by him. Executives in sharp suits, assistants with clipboards, designers with mock-ups tucked under their arms. No one stopped. No one even looked twice. He was invisible just like I often felt. I froze. I knew I wasn't supposed to interfere. My supervisor had been clear. "Stay in your lane, Hannah. Do your tasks. Don't cause trouble." But watching his shoulders slump, seeing the defeat in his eyes, something tugged at me. I thought of Lily, my little cousin. She had been born with a speech disorder, and when everyone else struggled to communicate with her, I had thrown myself into learning sign language. It had started as a way to connect with her, but over time it became part of who I was. And in that moment, standing in that crowded lobby, I realized I couldn't just walk away. My heart pounded as I stepped forward, every instinct screaming that I was about to get in trouble. But I pushed those fears down. I smiled softly at the man, lifted my hands and signed. "Hello. My name is Hannah. Can I help you?" The transformation was immediate. His eyes widened, surprise and relief flooding his face. Then he smiled, a genuine, grateful smile that told me I had done the right thing. I didn't know it yet, but with that one small choice, my entire life was about to change. The man's smile stayed with me, soft but powerful, as if the simple fact that someone understood him lifted a weight off his shoulders. His hands moved gracefully, though slower than what I was used to, as he signed back. "You sign?" "Thank you." I nodded, my fingers trembling slightly. "Yes. I sign. I can help you." For the first time that morning he looked calm. He told me his name was Edward, though his voice barely formed the sounds. His lips moved while his hands signed, and I caught the effort it took him to push the words out. "I'm here," he signed, "to see someone. Important. But not sure if I belong." I felt my chest tighten. How could a man like him, dignified, clearly successful, and full of quiet strength, think he didn't belong? Yet his uncertainty was written in every line of his posture. Around us the lobby was loud. Phones rang, heels clicked across marble, voices rose in rushed conversations. But between Edward and me there was silence. A silence filled with meaning. So I hesitated. A voice inside me whispered, "This isn't your job, Hannah. You're just an intern. If your supervisor sees you wasting time, you'll be finished." My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret, my supervisor. "Where are you? Need you in the copy room. Now." I bit my lip. I should have gone. I should have turned away, apologized, and left Edward to wait alone. That was the safe choice. That was the expected choice. But then I thought of Lily. My little cousin's bright eyes the first time I signed her name. The way her face lit up when she realized someone had entered her world instead of forcing her into theirs. I thought of all the times people ignored her, dismissed her, acted as if her words weren't worth the effort. And suddenly leaving Edward felt impossible. I signed again, my movements firm this time. Tell me, who are you here to see? Maybe I can help. He looked at me for a long moment, surprise flickering across his face. Then slowly he lifted his hands. My son, he signed. His expression grew complicated, pride and sadness tangled together. I want to see him. But he's busy. I don't want to disturb. I smiled gently, though inside my nerves rattled. Who was his son? Why did he seem almost ashamed to ask? I'll help you, I promised, my hands steady. You are not a disturbance. For the first time since he walked through those glass doors, Edward's eyes shone with hope. And as I led him to a chair, one thought kept repeating in my mind. This choice could cost me my internship. But it felt like the only choice that mattered. Edward sat in one of the leather chairs in the lobby, his posture stiff at first, like a man bracing himself for rejection. I sat across from him so he could see my hands clearly. Would you like some water? I signed. He nodded gratefully and I hurried to the nearby refreshment station. My supervisor's texts buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored them. At that moment, nothing felt more important than making Edward feel welcome. When I returned with the water, he gave me a smile that softened the lines on his face. His hands moved slowly, deliberately. You're kind. People usually rush. Don't notice. The words hit me like a quiet truth. How many times had I felt the same way? Overlooked. Invisible. Forgotten. We began to chat in sign language and soon, Edward was telling me small stories from his life. About the books he loved, about the garden he kept at home, about the pride he felt for his family. His signing was elegant but slightly out of practice, as if it had been too long since someone really wanted to listen. Around us, the noise of Sterling and Company never slowed. Executives swept past us with laptops tucked under their arms. Designers whispered about deadlines as they darted toward elevators. Every so often someone would glance at us, their expression a mix of curiosity and annoyance. I felt the weight of their stares. I could practically hear what they were thinking. Why is the intern wasting time? What's she doing with that old man? At the reception desk, Jessica frowned, clearly tired of Edward's presence and of my insistence on giving him attention. She whispered something to another employee who looked over at us and shook his head. The pressure built inside me. Part of me wanted to shrink back into invisibility, to retreat before anyone noticed. But then I looked at Edward. His eyes were alive now, full of gratitude, as if being seen, really seen, gave him strength. And I realized, for the first time since starting this internship, I wasn't invisible. I mattered. Still, a nervous knot formed in my stomach. I knew the longer I stayed with him, the more trouble I was inviting. Margaret would find out. My name would be on some report as the intern who didn't follow instructions. But then Edward signed something that froze me. I came to see my son. Not sure he wants me here. Not sure he has time. I tilted my head, confusion sparking. Why would anyone's son not have time for a father like this? I signed gently. He's lucky you came. I'll help you. Edward's expression shifted, a flash of relief quickly hidden behind composure. And though I didn't yet know who his son was, one thing became clear. This moment was about more than helping a visitor. It was about dignity. What I didn't realize was that from the mezzanine above, someone was already watching us. Someone whose opinion could change my future forever. Edward sipped his water, then looked toward the elevators. His hands moved slowly, hesitantly. I want to see my son. But name, maybe you know him. Something in the way he paused told me he wasn't sure he should say it. His fingers hovered in the air, uncertain, and for a moment I wondered if he was protecting himself, or his son. Do you remember his name? I asked gently in sign. Maybe if you tell me I can help you find him. He frowned, searching his memory. His lips formed a soundless syllable, but no words came out. His hands faltered. Then with a tired sigh he shook his head. It will come back, he signed finally. In the meantime, show me? I hesitated. My supervisor's angry text still buzzed in my pocket, but something in Edward's eyes begged me not to send him back into the shadows. So I nodded. All right. Let's take a walk. The hallways of Sterling and Company stretched before us, polished floors gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. Employees moved quickly, their eyes glued to screens or papers. They barely noticed the quiet old man walking beside me, his steps careful but dignified. As we passed the creative department, I stopped to show Edward the boards filled with campaign sketches. He leaned close, eyes narrowing in admiration at the bright colors and bold fonts. Beautiful work, he signed. Art. Expression. You explain. So I did. I translated what the designers were working on, explaining how the campaigns were built from brainstorming to presentation. He nodded with interest, his face lighting up as if he belonged here, as if this company mattered to him more than he admitted. We moved on, passing the marketing team. He pointed at the charts on the walls, curious about the graphs and numbers. I explained as best I could, my hands flying in quick signs, my words soft but steady. Everywhere we went, people stared. Some whispered. Others frowned. An intern giving a personal tour to a stranger was not exactly protocol. I felt the pressure building, my heart hammering in my chest. Still, Edward was smiling, his eyes alive with curiosity. For the first time that morning, I forgot about my own invisibility. I was proud to help him, proud that my skill mattered. We reached the mezzanine level where the sunlight spilled in through tall glass windows. Edward paused, looking out at the city skyline. His fingers moved slowly, tenderly. My son built something important, successful. I am proud. But sometimes I feel far away from him. There it was again, that complicated mix of pride and sadness. Whoever his son was, he mattered deeply to Edward. I opened my mouth to ask more, but before I could, a sharp voice cut through the air like glass shattering. Hannah. I spun around, my stomach dropping. It was Margaret. Her heels clicked furiously against the marble floor as she stormed toward us, eyes blazing. What do you think you're doing? She hissed, her voice low but deadly. You were assigned to prepare presentation materials. Instead, you're parading around the building with, she flicked her eyes to Edward, dismissive, a visitor who has no appointment and no clearance. I froze, guilt crashing over me. My throat closed, my hands went clammy. I was just what? Margaret snapped. Neglecting your duties? Do you have any idea how much trouble this could cause? If Mr. Sterling hears about this, your internship is over. Edward shifted uncomfortably beside me, clearly sensing the tension even if he couldn't hear her words. His expression fell, shame clouding his features. I wanted to explain, to defend him, to say that he wasn't just any visitor, that he was here for his son. But before I could sign a word, another voice interrupted. Confirm. Actually, Margaret. The entire hallway seemed to go silent. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Standing a few feet away, tall and commanding in a perfectly cut suit, was Richard Sterling, the CEO himself. His sharp eyes weren't on Margaret. They weren't even on me. They were on Edward. And in that single charged moment, the entire balance of the day shifted. The air in the mezzanine turned heavy the moment Richard Sterling spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority, the kind that made everyone freeze mid-step. Margaret's face drained of color. Mr. Sterling, she stammered, her tone shifting instantly from fury to fear. I was just. But Richard lifted one hand, silencing her without a word. His eyes stayed fixed on Edward, who now stood straighter, dignity returning to his posture even under all the stares. Dad, Richard said quietly. The word hit me like a lightning bolt. Dad. My gaze shot between them. The powerful CEO, respected and feared by everyone in this building, and the gentle older man who had been sitting alone, ignored moments ago. Edward's eyes softened. Slowly, deliberately, his hands moved. Richard. The CEO's chest rose and fell once, as though steadying himself. Then, to everyone's shock, he lifted his own hands and signed back. His movements were clumsy, hesitant, but unmistakable. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were here. I should have come sooner. A ripple of murmurs spread among the employees who had stopped to watch. Margaret's mouth hung open as if her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. The CEO, their CEO, signing in the middle of the lobby to the man she had just dismissed as a disruption. Edward's lips trembled with the faintest smile. His hands moved with ease. He tried. That's what matters. Richard swallowed hard, his expression tight with restrained emotion. Then he turned slightly, his gaze landing on me. "And you," he said. My knees nearly gave out. Heat surged up my neck. This was it. I was finished. The intern who ignored her supervisor, abandoned her duties and gave an unauthorized tour. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," I blurted out. "I shouldn't have." But Richard didn't let me finish. "You shouldn't have?" he echoed. "Miss Hannah, you did what no one else in this lobby could do. You saw him. You helped him. And you reminded me of something I've been neglecting for far too long." The world tilted. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Margaret stepped forward, desperate to salvage her authority. "Sir, with respect, this intern abandoned her assignment and—" "She was doing her real assignment," Richard cut in, his voice sharp now. "The kind of assignment I wish every one of my employees would understand. To treat people like people. To see their worth." Silence fell. Edward looked at me, pride and gratitude shining in his eyes. Richard's expression softened again as he turned back to his father. "I've been watching," he admitted. "From the mezzanine. For over an hour. I saw you smiling, Dad. Happier than I've seen you in years. And it was because of her." My throat tightened. My hands shook. I wanted to vanish and cry all at once. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice but making sure everyone heard. "Miss Hannah, I need to speak with you in my office. There are things we should discuss." Margaret's jaw dropped. Employees whispered. And as Richard gently offered his arm to his father, guiding him toward the executive elevator, I realized something extraordinary. I wasn't in trouble. I was being noticed. For the very first time. The executive elevator doors slid open with a quiet chime, carrying the three of us upward. Richard Sterling, his father Edward, and me, the intern who suddenly felt like she was standing on the edge of a life she didn't recognize. The ride was silent except for the soft hum of the motor. Richard stood tall, his hand lightly resting on his father's arm, steadying him. I glanced at Edward, who seemed almost radiant now, his earlier frustration melted away. When the doors opened, we stepped into Richard Sterling's office. A vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city skyline. The office was filled with polished wood, gleaming awards and photographs of campaigns that had made Sterling and Company famous. But what struck me wasn't what was in the office. It was what was missing. There was nothing personal. No family photos. No signs of warmth. It felt like a museum to success rather than a place where someone lived their life. "Please sit," Richard said, gesturing toward the leather chairs in front of his desk. I sank into one nervously while Edward took the other. To my surprise, Richard didn't sit behind the desk. Instead, he pulled a chair to sit beside his father, as if making a deliberate choice to be at his side rather than above him. For a moment, Richard was quiet, his gaze fixed on Edward. Then he lifted his hands again, his movements stiff but determined. "I should have learned earlier. I should have tried harder. I thought, making this company big would make you proud. But I forgot to show you that you were already enough." Edward's eyes glistened. His fingers moved fluidly, reassuring. "You are my son. Always proud. But I wanted you, not just your success." My chest tightened as I watched them. Years of distance and unspoken regret melted in that moment, replaced by something fragile but real. A father and son finding their way back to each other. All because I had chosen to stop and sign one word in the lobby. Richard drew in a steadying breath, then turned his gaze toward me. His sharp CO expression returned, but this time softened with something new, respect. "Miss Hannah," he began. I straightened, bracing for the blow. This was it. The gentle dismissal before being escorted out. "I know you expect me to fire you," he said simply. "But what I saw today changed my mind." I blinked, unable to process his words. "Sir, I neglected my duties. I broke protocol. You did exactly what this company needs," he interrupted, his voice firm. "You gave my father something no one else here thought to give him. Dignity. Connection. Belonging. That matters more than a perfectly stapled presentation packet." The room spun. Was he praising me? Richard leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped. "We talk about diversity and inclusion here at Sterling and Company. It's printed in our mission statement. It's in every handbook. But the truth is, we don't live it. We don't embody it. Until today." He glanced at Edward, then back at me. I want to change that. And I want you to help me. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. Me? Sir, I'm just an intern. I don't even have my degree yet. You have something far more valuable than a degree, Richard said. His voice had softened now, but it carried undeniable weight. You have empathy. You have the courage to step forward when others step aside. And you have a skill that can transform this company. My heart hammered. I'm creating a new position, Richard continued. Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. You'd be responsible for ensuring this company is accessible to everyone. Employees, clients, and visitors. You'd report directly to me. Salary, benefits, authority to implement real change. I couldn't breathe. Just hours ago I was invisible, unnoticed, a shadow in the background. And now, this? Edward looked at me, his eyes shining with excitement. His hands moved rapidly, his signs filled with warmth. Say yes. You remind me of my wife. He saw people. Truly saw them. You gave me back my son. My throat tightened. Tears threatened. I shook my head slightly, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Richard's lips curved into the faintest smile. Say you'll think about it. Take the weekend. But know this, Sterling and Company needs someone like you. I need someone like you. For the first time since I had started at Sterling and Company, I didn't feel like an invisible intern. I felt chosen. The Monday after that unforgettable meeting, my life no longer looked the same. I wasn't just the shy intern hiding in the background anymore. I was officially Sterling and Company's first Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. The title alone terrified me and thrilled me. I was young, inexperienced, still finishing my degree. But Richard's words kept echoing in my mind. You have empathy. You have courage. You see people. So I began. The first weeks were overwhelming. I conducted a full accessibility audit of the building. What I found was both eye-opening and disheartening. Visual alerts were missing. Meeting rooms lacked interpreters. Marketing materials weren't accessible to people with hearing or speech impairments. Even the website failed basic accessibility tests. But instead of discouraging me, every flaw motivated me. I gathered teams, spoke to experts, and built training programs. At first, employees rolled their eyes. Some thought it was a distraction, something extra. Until they met Edward. Richard invited his father to speak at one of our new training sessions. Edward signed about his experiences, the countless times he'd been ignored, the moments he'd felt invisible, the loneliness of not being understood. As I interpreted for him, silence fell across the room. People leaned forward, listening with new eyes. Something shifted that day. In the months that followed, Sterling and Company transformed. We installed visual alert systems across the building. Every major meeting included an interpreter. Employees learned basic sign language during lunch breaks. Our marketing campaigns were redesigned to be inclusive of all audiences. Even Margaret, my once furious supervisor, became one of my most enthusiastic students. After class one afternoon, she pulled me aside and said softly, "I don't want to miss what truly matters ever again." That sentence stayed with me. 6 months later, Sterling and Company received a national award for workplace inclusion. Richard asked me to accept it on behalf of the company. Standing at the podium, lights hot on my face, I looked out at the sea of people. Executives, employees, clients, and then to the two figures in the front row. Edward, beaming, signing his applause with pride. Richard, smiling in a way that was no longer cold or distant, but warm and human. I spoke from the heart. This recognition belongs to everyone at Sterling who chose to see inclusion not as a burden, but as an opportunity to become better. But most of all, it belongs to a wise man who reminded me that the most important skill in business isn't knowing how to close a deal. It's knowing how to see the humanity in every person you meet. Edward's eyes shone with tears. Richard's did too. Today my little cousin Lily visits the office often. She runs down the hallways, signing to employees who wave back with hands they once thought would never need to know her language. And every time I see her confidence bloom, I remember how it all started. With a lonely man standing in a busy lobby. With one intern too scared to speak up, but brave enough to sign a single word. Hello. That day I thought I was helping him. But the truth is, he helped me too. I wasn't invisible anymore. I had found my voice, not through speaking but through seeing, through listening, through choosing to care. And sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. What do you think? Would you have risked your internship to help Edward that day? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories about kindness, courage, and unexpected second chances.